Time of Construction fam. Hey, we're excited. This is a big one. This guy is a legend. I think a national treasure. Really, Scott with FMI. Just a blessing. Super excited to have him on the show. His wisdom is profound. This will be not the last time we have him around. So tune in. Lots of good nuggets. I couldn't tell you if the beginning, middle, or end was best. So you got to listen to the whole thing. First and foremost, Scott, thanks for making time for us. This is a big one for us. Kyle said your name, and he's like, you got to get that guy on here. And you were receptive to my pursuit. So thanks for coming and chatting with us this morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thanks for pointing out this legendary construction professional to me, Kyle. I'm enlightened just by your presence. And I mean that. You've got years of experience. So quick agenda. I just want to tell your builder story, Scott, like your experience in the trades, your company. Is FMI? Is it FMI?
Yep, FMI Corp. Yep.
We talk about FMI. I want to just do a real quick, what your inspiration, like you work with the biggest and the best, which I adore and I respect. I think like my audience is the people that want to get to the minimum threshold for you guys. So I want to do a little like, what would your advice be for the up and comers? I know you don't want to go here, but I'm going to beg of us to go here. I want to talk about like some of what I call the contracting, kind of the disparity within the structure of our industry. And then I just want to talk about, I have like a standard leader book question. I like to ask all construction leaders some weird questions that I'll grill you on. And then I want to talk about your favorite deal and your least favorite deal in all your years. So that would be kind of where I want to take us. And then Kyle, just interrupt at any point, man. Like this is your conversation as much as it is mine.
Sure. Yep. I got a few things I want to jump in there and in between, but Scott, I'm pumped to have you because you have such a good perspective on the industry, a very unique perspective for me. And I love the stuff that you're putting out there on LinkedIn and all that. So we're going to get into some good stuff here.
Great. Look forward to it.
Sweet. With that, Scott, this is how I do it. Take me from birth to today. Scott had a particular emphasis on your career within the trades. I don't know how many years it's been, but I think you got Kyle and I beat on that front. So your wealth of knowledge imparted on us. How did you come to be where you are today?
So birth to today is going to be a long journey for me. But actually born and raised right outside of Tampa, Florida, and kind of grew up in a construction family. My dad was always involved with construction. He was an estimator for a trade contracting business. My dad was smart enough not to hire me. I was smart enough not to go to work for him, but always liked being around the business, hitting job sites, driving by stuff my dad built, 10 years earlier. And, he would continue to point that out till the day he died. But I ended up going to college right here in Tampa at the University of South Florida. Got out in '84 with my undergrad in business and kind of looked around at the jobs a lot of my friends were getting, and they weren't too inspiring. So I went and hid in a couple more years to get my MBA and graduated there in '87. And coming out of school, I was interviewing for a number of different jobs, some of which were out of town jobs, but I actually ran into one of my classmates in the mall one evening. And he said, "Hey, have you heard of this company FMI? A couple of us have interviewed with them. They're hiring. You may want to talk to these guys." And so I think I tracked them down that following Monday, got an interview with them, and ultimately came to work for them right out of graduate school in 1987. At the time, they were primarily just hiring freshly minted MBAs. They would staple them to the hip of kind of a senior person, and you would travel with them and work on projects with them, and you would kind of learn the consulting business from one of them. So, that was kind of how I got my start with FMI. A little bit about FMI context would be helpful, but we are a management consulting and investment banking firm that works strictly in what we now call the built environment. We used to kind of refer to it as the construction industry, but built environment sounds much cooler. And it started to include, initially our core clients, probably 95% of them were contractors of some form or fashion. But we've kind of grown to a point where we're working with building product manufacturers, people that sell their products to contractors, We do a fair amount of work for private equity who's making pretty decent investments in this industry. And so it's a little bit broader than just the construction world, but kind of two sides to our business. We're based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. We've got about 200 employees, a little over 200 employees spread out between Raleigh, which is our headquarters. I'm actually based in our Tampa, Florida office. We have an office in Houston and an office in Denver. Pretty much cover the U.S., do a little bit of international work, not a lot. One side of our business is our investment banking business, which we call FMI Capital Advisors. And, think of kind of M&A. Most of everything they do is related to the transfer of ownership or the sale of stock. But, if you were looking at buying or selling a construction business, they would be the guys to help you with that. And we transact more businesses in this space than anybody in the U.S., maybe anybody in the world, because it's the only area that we focus. In any given year, that makes up about half of our revenue. And then the other side of our business, which I kind of grew up on, is our consulting side. And think of kind of a just business advisory, management consulting services for people in the construction industry. So we do a fair amount of strategic planning. Companies trying to figure out kind of where to play, how to play, where's the money going to be spent in the next 3 to 5 years, how to get in the intersection of that today. We've got a fairly robust research group that works with them. So anytime we're helping a contractor with strategic planning, we're also kind of bringing research to the table. So it's not simply, 10 or 12 smart people sitting around the table saying, hey, what do you guys think we ought to do? But, all of it is research-based. We try to bring as much data to the table so we can make kind of fact-based strategic decisions. The group that I'm in is what we call our performance practice. There's really kind of two key services we offer. Probably 80% of what we do in the performance practice is work with labor-intensive, self-performing trade contractors, helping them just get better and more effective at managing the largest controllable cost in their business, which is obviously labor, right? So, as labor goes, their business goes. And that's kind of where I've spent the majority of my career since about 92 is just working with trade contractors, people with a fair amount of labor, MEP, site civil, drywall, concrete, those kind of companies. Most of our clients tend to be what we would call mid-market or bigger. A $50 million a year trade contractor would be a small client for us. Our sweet spot's probably in, the 100 million in revenue to 300 million in revenue. That's probably where 80% of our clients fall. Also within performance, we have a compensation practice. So if you're looking to benchmark compensation, trying to figure out, hey, what do you pay project managers in this part of the country doing this kind of work? We've got a service where you can benchmark. You basically sign up, you pay, you provide your data, and then once your data is in the system, you've got access to kind of the other data that you can kind of do some comparative type of benchmarking with. And then that group also does a fair amount of what I would call short-term incentive comp plans. So think of your annual bonus plan, trying to make that a little bit more objective and kind of based on measurable kind of things as opposed to discretionary, which has historically been the way a lot of contractors have, bonused their people. And then they do a lot of what we'll call long-term deferred comp. So golden handcuff plans. You've got 2 or 3 executives that are kind of key, fundamental to your business. If they were to leave, it would be pretty impactful. So there's plans you can put in place where they vest over time, and if they were to exit your company, they'd be leaving behind a chunk of cash. So it's kind of a retention strategy for senior people. Then we've got our third group on the consulting side is leadership organizational development. So think of everything soft skills training from CEO level down to kind of frontline management leadership skills for foremen, superintendents, and everything in between. Some of those we do on a public basis. A lot of them we're kind of tailoring training within a client firm based on their needs. And then on top of that, we've got about 40 active peer groups, everywhere from general contractor groups, every kind of trade you can think of group, MEPs, civil, drywall, concrete. We've got about 40 of those, 6 to 8 companies that don't compete, that are fairly similar in size and sophistication from different parts of the country. We get together 2 times a year, and we share everything from financial statements to best practices to what are you wrestling with in your business. And so those are kind of our major service offerings. And then, senior folks in the organization like myself, most of us sit on a board of directors here or there for a contractor or construction, related business. So that's a quick fly through, but an overview of what FMI does. And like I said, since 1987, most of my time has been spent kind of working on the operational side with the labor intensive guys.
I have to make one caveat, and then Kyle, I'll let you go. We don't have a peer group for us. I'm branding us the lonely outsiders, the pavers, the fencers, and the landscapes, the bastardized of the trades. Those are my people. There's no group for us, so don't go looking for it. Kyle, any questions for him?
No, well, first off, you guys clearly do a lot, which is why I appreciate your perspective so much. I guess to kick us off, one question. You've seen a lot, done a lot, and have seen the business from a very unique perspective. What are some of the most common reasons that construction companies fail? What are those common problems that you see? Yeah,
great question, Kyle. I want to remember the year. It was kind of after the 2010 to 2012 kind of downturn in the industry, but we actually did one of the largest single research studies that I think FMI has ever done. And the title of the research was Why Large Contractors Fail. And basically what we did was we took ENR's list from whatever year that was, 2012, 2013, kind of laid out the list and then said, all right, let's back up 10 years before this and see who was on this list 10 years ago that's not around today. And so we identified, I want to say it was 14 companies that 10 years previous had been, on the list of largest contractors in the country that were no longer around. And through a bunch of industry contacts, CFOs that we knew, people in the banking, bonding industry, we tracked a lot of the people down that were involved in those companies. We did a bunch of research to understand what led to their demise. And interesting, it came down to a handful of kind of common characteristics, but interestingly, the most common thread was obsession with volume and top line versus obsession with bottom line. And it was the old adage that, hey, if you were number 89 on ENR's list last year, this year we're going to be, in the 70s. And so most contractors get in trouble. What do they say? More of them die of gluttony than starvation. I don't think I've ever seen a contractor in my 38 years go out of business because they didn't have enough work. It can get ugly. The founder, the president has to put on their estimating PM hat, but eventually, they can scale the business down. But contractors, most of it get in trouble going out through the top. And, they run out of cash, start taking bad jobs, and it just becomes kind of a death spiral for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it kind of, coincides with this philosophy that I've kind of, really latched onto over the last couple of years. Read a book called How Big Things Get Done. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's like projects fail. It kind of a similar kind of thing. We think we're fueled on optimism. We're biased for optimism. We're biased for growth. We're biased for top line revenue. That's what the shiny thing is. Anyways, the thesis of the book is that projects that fail, they fail because it's just bad planning, and going into a project fueled on optimism when it's just really we need to look at it through the right lens, creating a good plan. And if the plan's not good, then don't move forward on the project. Same with just this. Kind of remind me of that note you said about chasing and growing and obsessing over scale. So that's very interesting. And is there any other reasons that come to mind?
Yeah, I think part of it, if you just kind of look at the dynamics of the industry, every few years we do an industry-wide study or survey and then create a white paper around it on construction productivity, just to kind of see what companies are thinking and doing on that topic. And if you look at it, there's
really quick, just for the audience, is that available to the public, or that's paid for, or you got to be in network, or how? If somebody was like,
I can get you a copy of it, a PDF copy of it. You can share with anybody. We use it to kind of promote. It's a marketing piece for us, but it also helps us just make sure we're on the consulting side focusing on the right things, right? So, yeah, it's absolutely something I can share with you guys.
Okay, but go ahead.
Yeah, and when you kind of break it down, there's both internal factors, things that are within a company's control that cause projects to go good or bad, but there's also external factors. And one of the things that we've seen, just continue to become a problem is the quality of plans and specs that people are having to bid and build from today. So you've got big projects that contractors are required to provide a fixed price at some percentage of design, and what they ultimately have to build from just isn't they're not constructible. They're not at a point, and so the contractors have to make a lot of decisions, have to do kind of the final mile of design just to be able to make it constructible. So there's a lot of factors that I think play into that. But one of the things, Kyle, that we are seeing is generally the larger the project, the higher the risk of failure.
Mm-hmm. So once like a leadership team is detached from the idea of chasing top line revenue, and they're now focused on bottom line, right? They take FMI's advice, or they've just learned through hard lessons. What does that look like when they're now thinking bottom line revenue? Like, what does that look like in practice? What are some kind of ideas and tips to now focus in on the bottom line?
Yeah, good question. I think, I guess the best analogy I can give you, and I don't want to come across as anti-growth. I honestly think a company has to be growing to be healthy, to attract talent, to be exciting for people. If people don't see opportunity, it's going to be really hard to attract and retain. So I'm not against growth, but kind of the way we describe it, Kyle, is just like a building, right? Before you grow, you've got to have a good foundation. If you try to grow on a shaky foundation, what happens is, the cracks in the foundation get larger. The higher the builder goes, the bigger the building gets. And so, if you look at just the things in the foundation, there's some basics, right? As a contractor, just to simplify it, the first thing you got to be able to do is to win profitable work. And so, do you have good foundational processes around knowing your sweet spot, knowing what to chase, what not to chase, where you're most productive, but project selection and knowing, quite frankly, if you look at most contractors, the two most profitable jobs a year that they'll have are the two bad jobs that they say no to, right? Knowing it, in hindsight, if we knew when to say no, this industry would probably be twice as profitable today. And so, having good foundation around work acquisition, which jobs to chase, having good foundation around knowing your cost on bid day. If you look at operationally successful companies, one of the things I would tell you is they're pretty darn good at knowing and estimating their cost on bid day. And cost is cost, margin's margin, not muddling up those two things and, those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But just good direct cost estimating, knowing how to apply overhead to a job that is related to the overhead of the business. So just the whole get work function, there's foundational things that you have to be good at there. Anytime you hear contractors saying, hey, we've got to have this job, a lot of emotion can creep into the bid room. And that's usually a red flag, right? That 6 months later, you're going to be having some issues and you're going to see, problems on a project. Mm. So once you get it, another foundation is just how do you get it out of the hands of estimating into the hands of the guys that have to build it, guys and gals that have to build it. But just transitioning from estimating to field management and to project management, having a good plan. That's fundamental. For most trade contractors today, a big part of that is a prefabrication plan. With the schedules required of some projects, traditional stick belt, methodologies just won't get you there today. And so if you look at operationally successful contractors, most of them are trying to figure out, how do we take as much work out of the wind, the sleet, the snow, the hail, the mud, and put it in a controlled environment. So that's why you've seen, kind of this move towards prefab, modularization, but that's going to be an ongoing, all of our research just says, hey, 5 years from now, it's going to be a much bigger part of what you're seeing in the industry.
Yeah.
And then you got to have good project management processes, consistency in how your PMs kind of do certain things. Same at the field management level. So, when we talk about having solid foundation, those are some of the examples of things that build a strong foundation. Once you've got those, I guess the last one that I think a lot of people are just coming to the conclusion late on is you've got to become as good at building talent as you are building projects. And if you don't have the fundamentals around attracting, retaining, developing talent, a growth strategy is just going to be, taking you to kind of a death spiral. So that's a big, big part of the foundational element right now.
Wow. That's a lot of gold there, Scott. Thank you. And that kind of sets it up for one of my next questions. So I'm a project executive, so I live this kind of day to day. And I just want a quick plug for your book here. Profitable projects, profitable business. Love this book. Changed me forever. In here, we talk about project manager versus project witness. We talked about, you just mentioned project manager. We have to have good project management practices, right? Some consistency across the PM department. Everyone's got to be working off the same way, the same process. So can you define or kind of talk about the difference between project manager, project witness, and what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. If you kind of break down the different things that a project manager manages, right? The budget and cost on a job has got to be a big part of that. You've got a client relationship, you've got a contract that you have to manage, you have, you've got cost, you've got schedule, probably a couple other things that I didn't think of there, but cost is a big one. And what we kind of see in the industry is there are some project managers who have a very solid finger on their pulse of, financially, where does this job stand today versus where it should be based on what has been put in place, right? So just knowing, are we winning or are we losing? Where are we winning or losing? How much are we ahead or behind based on kind of where we're at today? And so to me, that's one fundamental of project management. If you don't know where your job stands from a cost, and I'm not just talking about the overall job, but the various parts and pieces and small projects within a large project, that's key. And then the second characteristic that I think differentiates a project manager from project witness is not only can they tell you where that project is today, but they can tell you with pretty good reliability and accuracy from a cost standpoint of where that project's going to stand at completion. So cost to complete accuracy, being able to predict, where are we actually going to come in, to me is what really differentiates a project manager from a project witness. And, another saying we like to use on the project witness side is, they're just spectators to margin erosion, right? They're sitting on the sideline and, in most cases, they're just reporting bad news, as it happens or after it happens. And those are also the same PMs that it seems like their jobs tend to go bad at 80%, 90%. Those jobs were going bad at 10%. They just didn't have their finger on the pulse and the right processes in place to be able to identify that.
I'm going to insert myself really quick, Kyle, because there's been too many gold nuggets, and I got to summarize it for the my dudes that took a break from digging holes to listen to this, because there's a lot of pie in the sky here. So to summarize, and this part of this is also for editor's note, like make sure the title of this is building an elite company. Because I think, Scott, all your advice is how to build an elite company. Like it's like you, and like unfortunately all of this is going over a lot of our heads in this smaller space because we're just trying to survive tomorrow. So I've heard you say in 38 years of experience, but some quotes that I think I would like to be highlighted in the notes to the editor is like, most companies fail due to gluttony, not starvation. In your 38 years, you haven't seen a one run out of work. You've seen a many get too much work unprofitably, like key star, asterisk, asterisk, star, star. I was very guilty of this and almost lost my business because of it. Super profound. I think another statement you made that I would like to quote is companies must be growing to be healthy. I think that's awesome, but also doesn't necessarily, it's confusing to us. We heard don't grow too big, but you got to be growing to be healthy. So finding that fine line is super important. And the most profitable, this is profound, that you said, most profitable jobs are the two you said no to. Star, star, asterisk, star, to my specialty contractor. Like, big deal there. And then this whole concept, and Kyle, I'm sure you've already kind of imparted this and expounded upon this, but this just speaks to me, being a project manager, not a project witness. That is so profound. So those were the key highlights that I took away from everything that was just said.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the only other point I made was, the idea that the project witness is what we call a spectator to margin erosion, right? They kind of report bad news after it happens.
It's so accurate. My whole company was run like that, candidly, for a long time, and it was so frustrating.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, Kevin, just to provide a little context, FMI we don't typically work with jacked up companies. Nothing we do is anything a contractor wakes up one morning and says, hey, I've got to have this. I got to call FMI. All of it is discretionary spending. So most of the clients we work with, I would tell you, are above average or better. They're companies that are willing to invest in process. They're willing to invest in people. They believe in getting kind of outside thinking to help them as a company. So that's important to understand is we don't fix broken companies. We work with good companies to help them become great companies. That's kind of really our high level.
That's awesome. Kyle, I'm going to steal the show just really quick because that's a good segue in because what I want to be is a turnaround guy. Like I want to go to where you guys don't want to go. Like I love it when it's icky. If it's, you guys are the refiners and the perfecters. I'm like, give it to me broken and I'll get it ready for Scott. So I was going to ask you this and it'd be unfair. Like what I'd like to give those of us that are struggling, I'm thinking of the solopreneur up to the 30 million. I think you said 30 was the point where it's really just a lifestyle business. And then 50, it's still small for you guys. But those of us that are running, $1 million to $5 million shops and slugging it out every day and not making any money, I just want to give them something. And I was going to ask you, what would your guidance be? And instead of making you try to come up with that on the spot, if you have it, I'll give it to you. Or I lined out my 6 steps and I'd love for you to edit it. Or if you have something, we'd rather it from the king himself. I'm just a dumb contractor.
I've got a little advice there. I don't think there's anybody out there that kind of does what we do. It kind of that side. There's some one-man consultancies. There's some moonlighting college professors. There's some people that do that. But I think, Kevin, the advice I would give is nobody that's achieved some level of success in whatever they do, whether it be professional sports, career, personal life, none of us got there without the help of other people, right? Mm-hmm. I truly believe that, and so. I'm a big fan of mentors. Find somebody else in the industry that has kind of gone through what you've gone through. Somebody with some business experience that understands our industry. But I'm a big fan of tapping into outside resources. Kyle, shared a resource. One of my colleagues, Cynthia Paul, wrote around financial management in this industry. It's for a financial book, it's pretty easy read and it's pretty understandable. But my advice would be get every resource you can to help you on the business side, the financial side of the business, because that's where most contractors, right? Most of them that start a business, they grew up in the trade, they can build anything, but they just don't have business acumen. They don't have financial acumen. And so, podcasts, just like we're doing here, learn anywhere you can, get resources, find people in the industry, that'll help you, coach you. But that would be my suggestion. Don't try to go it on your own. Somebody else out there has experienced it and can probably add some value.
It's so amazing because every episode Kyle and I've done have become a natural. It's like become a natural pitch for us to pitch what we're trying to do, and that is like we're. I hope that Kyle and I can set up the 101 environment or 101 environment for the small and aspiring that couldn't afford your firm. So yeah, I'm a witness to what you're saying. Vistage was huge for me, and then just bouncing ideas. But I think it's interesting, and that's where I see kind of a lack is like you guys don't have a peer group for us or the smallers, and so hopefully Kyle and I fully intend to build that, and would love your guys' advice and mentorship as we go to do that. Particularly, it's home base for me is the outsiders, the smallies, the landscapers, the fencers, and the asphalt people that. I just think we're the forgotten outsiders. So I want to do that because it's a strong network too. We're all selling to the same people, the same stuff, and deal with the same consequences. And lo and behold, we're tripping over each other when we're trying to get them to occupancy so that they can finish the job. It's us fighting with us. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this peer group concept. There's some people out there that you guys probably know that are doing some of these for, smaller site civil contractors. Benjamin Holmgren's doing some stuff. I don't know if y'all are familiar with him, but, for this size contractor. And I tell you what, when we started doing that years ago, it was actually a client that gave us the idea. It was a general contracting firm we were doing some consulting with. They were, I want to say they were a second, third generation business, kids in the business. And financially, they were doing pretty good, but they came to us and said, look, all we know is what we know. We all grew up in this business. We're an echo chamber. We breathe our own smoke. We never had any outside influence. Unlike public companies where you can go get, financials and kind of research them online and see, how do they perform and what they do. As a private business, you don't have that. And so they actually asked us, hey, could you go find 6 or 7 other companies like us? Put us together and kind of structure that. And it ended up being a huge hit. So we kind of grew that business to 40 of these groups of various trades. And I will tell you, the retention rate in these things, once people get in, they don't leave. They just don't. And it's just because it's valuable. And, you've got 6 or 7 other people in the room that fight the same challenges you do every day. And more than likely, somebody in that room has dealt with something you're wrestling with now and has some counsel or advice to help you, but they're very high value.
That's awesome. Kyle, do you have anything?
Yeah, before we hop on that next topic, I just wanted to drill in a little bit more on that project management, having the vision and the processes to, see a job that's going to be bad at 10% and know where it's going to end up, based on where you're at today and how to measure it. So is there a couple bullet points you could give us just on like, the KPIs or the processes, or maybe we could just define like this work in process reporting to be able to give these tools to a PM that he could better see this? What is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me kind of, I like to use analogies and sports analogies, just to kind of help paint a picture. But, when I think about, if I need to know, or somebody expects me to know where am I at on a project today, and I'm somewhere partially complete and where I'm going to be at completion, I have to know how I performed to this point. And the best analogy that I can use, Kyle, is, for somebody who's a golfer, right? You go out to a golf course, and most golf courses are 72 par, it's a 72 par course, most courses, but you can't wait until you played 18 holes and get to the end and say, oh crap, I shot 102 again, right? At that point it's too late. And so if you look at companies that really have their finger on the pulse of where is a job today and where's it going to be completion, they have a solid process around breaking a large project into small bite-sized projects, right? So when you jump in the golf cart at the country club, and you look on the steering wheel, the first thing you see is a scorecard. And at the very bottom of it, right, it shows 72 strokes to get around this thing. But it shows you, hey, the first hole is a par 4, and the second hole is a par 5, and the third hole is a par 3. And every time you play a hole, before you go to the next hole, what do? You write down how many strokes it took you, and you compare it to what was par in that hole. And so by the time you're 5, 6 holes into this course, hey, I'm 2 up or I'm 2 down, I'm even. You can kind of project, what's that going to look like if I extrapolate this over 18 holes and I'm playing as crappy as I'm playing today, right? Or, having a good round. But what I found is you have to track jobs at a bite-sized level that you can manage. And, a lot of the clients we work with are doing mega, mega, mega jobs, right? So they've got to break that thing down into bite-sized digestible pieces, but it's no different, with the size or scale that some of your contractors are working at. But, maybe only break it down into 3 bites or 4 bites, but you have to kind of bake big projects, small projects, so that, once you complete this first activity, am I on a trajectory like this, or am I on a trajectory like that? And be able to kind of extrapolate what that's going to look like at completion. But it's always amazed me in a labor-intensive business how you can go out to foremen who are, if you think about it, the foreman is the one managing and controlling our labor, right? They're their hands are the last ones that those labor dollars go through. And you ask them, hey, how are you doing on this job? How are you doing on this activity? Are you ahead? Are you behind? And you kind of get the deer in the headlights look, and they say, well, the boss hadn't been out here and chewed my ass in a week or 2, so I must be doing okay. Or, somebody told me, hey, you're doing okay. But in a business that, that's as labor intensive as we are, if you're 10% over on labor, at the margins we operate, you're underwater. And so foremen have to know what the expectation is. They have to know what par on every hole is, and they have to be getting a scorecard throughout the game for them to have any chance of managing labor or productivity on a job. Otherwise, it just is going to be what it takes, and they're going to work hard and do the best they can. Kind of like my golf game.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, breaking it down into chunks. That way you can see, oh, I just hit a double bogey on that hole. Oh, yeah, I can't continue that going forward. We need to get a birdie on the next one and a birdie on the next one and par out, and then we can make this. So that's key. Okay, so the scorecard is a fascinating topic for me. Kevin and I were big EOS guys that they have entrepreneurial operating system. What is a scorecard? Do you know what that looks like? Is it KPIs, or is it kind of like hours? This chunk of work is this many hours. This chunk of work is. Can you elaborate kind of on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a what we would call a job cost system, right? At the front of the job, somebody, hopefully the project manager and maybe the field manager collaborate and kind of say, all right, how are we going to build this project? And what's step 1 going to be? And what's the first bucket need to be, right? So how you break it down ought to really mirror how you're going to build the job. Because if you're asking the field guy to report, time, quantities to certain buckets, they have to understand it. If it's not logical to them, they're going to put all their dollars or hours into one bucket, and nothing's going to make sense. It's going to be garbage in, garbage out. So, on the front end, you got to set up kind of a budget. You got to break it into the pieces, and generally, to me, each piece has estimated hours, and depending on the type of work you're doing, it's got estimated units, right? There's so many widgets you got to install in this bucket, and here's the total hours. And then as they perform that work, they have to code their time. Now, this is where for smaller companies, behavioral change really starts to have to take place. But instead of just turning in a time card, they've got to start charging it to bucket 1 or bucket 2 or bucket 3, right? To get some clarity around that. So again, it's kind of the golf scorecard. You got to charge your right strokes to the same hole that you played them on, right?
Yes.
For it to make sense. And if people start playing games with that, but to me, it's fundamental, production and labor tracking in a very simple system. In a small company, I honestly think you could do some of that in a spreadsheet. For larger companies, they've got sophisticated job cost systems that kind of accommodate that.
A broad topic I had was field leadership, the good and the bad. I think we've kind of touched on that, and then change orders. I know change orders is a big deal in this business, and most of them are abused, the process. Is there any wisdom on change orders that has come to you over your years?
Yeah. Uh, that's a crazy subject. The contracts that general contractors are asking you guys to sign. In one clause, it tells you can't proceed, don't proceed on work without a change order. And then the next clause, it tells you have to proceed if we direct you to proceed without a change order, right? So, contractually, it's a mess, in my opinion.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I think if you talk to like a construction owner or end user, and certainly a general contractor, and ask them their perception, they think subcontractors are absolutely gouging them on change orders. I would tell you that I don't think a subcontractor ever gets paid for all the cost of doing change order work, because some of it's hard to calculate. I mean, there's research out there that shows you if it happens later in the project, the more the cost is. If you try to estimate change order work and change order scope using the same logic and production rates that you would have estimated it on bid day, you're going to be off by a multiple of 2. Your production rate on change work is never even close to what it is. And so, I think there's a perception issue. But what I found with change orders, I have had some clients that have been successful at times negotiating something in the contract that says when unresolved change orders get to some dollar amount or some percentage of the original contract, we're not doing any additional work until we clear the plate. And, the big challenge with change orders, even if you ultimately get paid for them, it's a cash flow thing, right? As a trade contractor, you're funding this, you're funding this out of your pocket, all the labor, materials, all that. And then, it takes forever to get the change order approved, and it takes another forever to get paid. But what I found with change orders, it's regardless of what the contractor says. I have some attorneys that probably, shellac me for this, but my take is once you've done the work and you've got something that says, hey, proceed with this work, it might not be an approved change order, but some documentation, I feel like people owe it to you. And what I found, quite frankly, is contractors that are the squeakiest wheels, especially if you're on a job with multiple trades, the squeaky wheel is the one that gets paid first. And I've got a client that I would say probably does they're fairly decent sized trade contractor. They've got multiple locations. But several years ago, they just told their PMs, look, once it gets beyond this dollar amount based on the size of the project or this percent, your response to your customer when they ask you to do additional work is, I'm not allowed to do that until we get these cleaned up. And if you want to talk to my boss, let me give you his card because it's out of my hands at this point, and have them call me. He said he's taken one call from a client, and he said he backs his guys up on it, but he just takes it out of his project manager's hands, so they're not having to wrestle and fight with their customer. And he just says, hey, call me. And when he calls, he's very matter of fact with him and says, hey, if you want us to move forward, you got to pay us for what we've already done. And he said it's been very successful. But sometimes that's different than the contract might indicate. But I think you've got to be the squeaky wheel. If you're not managing it and like a dog on a bone, you will be the last of the trade contractors, because once the work's done, there's no leverage, right? They have no incentive to pay you until, the project's, being closed out.
Yeah, I've seen that time and time again. And great advice there. Just real quick, Scott, on side note is I'm excited because you mentioned the leadership soft training skills. That is on my professional development plan. I'll probably be signing up for the FMI one at the end of the year. So is that you that runs it, or?
No. It is a very talented group of people that are they're kind of all organizational development. These people are passionate about it. I mean, the guy that started it, I think he went to the Air Force Academy. He was a military academy guy where leadership's a big deal.
Nice.
But they are awesome. These people are passionate about this. They live and breathe it. But I think you're talking about the Leadership Institute is the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
You definitely want to go to the one that's they'll run it in different locations. The one in Florissant, Colorado is the one you want to go to. It's an unbelievable environment. You're out in the middle of the woods. I've had people tell me it's a life-changing experience for them, honest to God.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot about yourself.
I don't know if you were selling it, but I'm interested. Kyle's a Colorado native, so you're speaking.
There you go.
His hometown.
My family lives out there, so
okay.
How convenient. That'd be great.
So I'm going to try to do a thing here. So recapping again, you guys are super vast. I don't know if you know it. I'm sporting my AFA shirt right now. So you guys just got hired for a significant sum of money by the association, the Fence Association, unrelated to me or our relationship. But you guys are going to be doing like the industry review for us. So you'll be because like literally the Fence Association doesn't know how big it is or what the average size contractor is. So we're paying you guys a fair sum of money to come and tell us about ourselves, which is super fascinating. But your guys' reach is huge. I've been talking about this, and I want to try to give some nuggets to the little guys to be at a size where they could come and hire your firm. Do you have any idea, first of all, like, so when most people I talk to hear about when I was 20 million, it's like, how are you running a $20 million business, right? And now 40 million and on and on. How many, is there any gauge of how many specialty contractors that is your TAM, like your total available market? Is there hundreds? Is there thousands? How many in America is like are running specialty trades at that level? Because I think it's good perspective for people to know what is actually possible. Is there only a dozen? Any idea? Just a rough order of magnitude of how many people are up at that level?
I don't know numbers, Kevin. I will tell you it's a hell of a lot more than we can get to. Yeah, the market, there's some consolidation that's gone on and that sort of thing, but it's a big market. I mean, if you look at construction, I think, healthcare is probably the only larger industry, technology, if you break that out, but construction is just a huge industry, and it's tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands. And I think that like that in and of itself is inspiration to anybody that's out there. Like it can be done. It's been done.
Oh yeah.
And then
I mean, you can look at ENR's top 600 trade contractors, and I don't know what the revenue is for number 600, but it's got to be a pretty big number still, right? So
there you go. That's good advice. ENR is great. So what I want to do, I did this on the fly. I was thinking like, what would Kevin's step by step be? So I would love for you to chew this up. But for the solopreneur, here's like, this would be my 7 steps, and you tell me what I'm missing or where you'd reemphasize or recalibrate, just to try to give them some value here. So step zero, I think it's very important for every entrepreneur to like define their North Star, where they're going, right? If this is a lifestyle business, know that, and don't kid yourself. If you're trying to build a company that doesn't need you, like I think everybody needs to start with their purpose statement, right? And know where they're going. That would be step 0. Then step 1 is, I think you need to define a culture that's meaningful, that inspires people to come to work. A purpose, define a purpose that's meaningful and resonates with people. It is why the business exists. And then set a culture that surrounds that so that you can create an environment for success. So that's step 1. And then step 2 for me, and I think you hit on it, and in the construction space, there's no shortage of leads. I believe you need to create some sort of, I consider infinite leads. Like you need to have a volume of work and leads that are coming in that you get to say no to. Step 3 would be define your niche. What if that work is what you're actually pursuing and you want? That's your cornerstone. Step 4 would be establish sound SOPs throughout the whole business so that success is non-optional. Step 5 would be, I would almost put this at step 2, honestly, but we need to create an infinite labor funnel, right? Like you can't scale if you're not going to scale, if you don't have people. The backbone of every company, particularly specialty for me, is labor. So I think your purpose and your culture speaks to that. But if you're going to scale, you need labor. Step 6 for me would be figure out a way to delete thyself. If you're going to be a business owner, be a business owner. Otherwise, you're occupying a job. If you're building a company, depending on where your North Star is, I would make it every business owner's intention should be to remove themselves unless they're filling a role within the org chart that they love. Step 7 would be just to iterate and improve, continual improvement, maximize the business, and keep refining. So what did I miss, or what would you say is heresy in the land of Scott? You are the subject matter expert. I'm the silly contractor that stumbled his way to some level of success.
Oh, you stumbled through that pretty well. That was pretty good. Yeah, I'm a big fan of kind of frameworks and models. So I like that. It's easy. I've got a simple mind, so I can think through 7 things pretty easily. I think your idea of kind of defining your North Star first makes a lot of sense. There's nothing wrong with being a lifestyle business. I've got friends that are contractors that make a dang good living, but the day they leave, the business fails to exist. And other contractors say, hey, I'm here to build something of value. If you're not a lifestyle business, you're building an asset of value that you can transition one day. And I think if you go that route, all those things you described are right on track, Kevin. But I kind of simplify and say, if you choose not to be a lifestyle business and you really want to grow something that has lasting value, that as a CEO or president, your role is to build a sustainable and transferable business. It will sustain from generation to generation, and you can transfer it to the next generation without employees really feeling a bump in the road, or even your customers feeling a bump in the road. Now, the one where you talk about removing yourself from the business, I still find most people in the trade contracting business, even my clients that are $200, $300 million, they're still at heart operational people, right? They got into this business because they like to build stuff, right? And they understand that they've got to build other people that can build stuff, right? That's kind of their role now, but they still have a foot in kind of the day-to-day ops of the business. And they're at a point where in many cases the business isn't dependent on them, but I don't see people really extract themselves, completely from the business, because most people that got into it love this stuff, right? They like being in the battle every day. They like, being in the war of a project and, slogging it out. It's just kind of the way they're wired. But I think your list is pretty solid. The only one that you had, and maybe it was kind of further down the list that I think when you think about the companies you're talking about, I think one of the first steps, if they choose not just to be a lifestyle business and really want to grow it, is I think they've got to get other leadership talent in the business at some point, right? And the founder of our company, Doc Fales, he was a pretty simple guy, but the way he looked at it, and I still think this makes sense. It's a little bit more complicated today, but at some point, probably before 30 million, if you think about a construction company, you need to be able to, one, get profitable work. Okay. So you've got to have somebody in your organization that heads up the work acquisition role. Some people call him a chief estimator, whatever, but who's going to kind of take that piece of the business and say, I'm going to build, a work acquisition function, right? You have to find who that person's going to be. At some point, you've got to, execute profitable work. Once you win it, you got to execute it. So you've got to have somebody to run the operations piece of your business. So think of project managers, field managers, somebody that's going to grow and develop them. They're going to build process around that. And quite frankly, that's where most founders stay. They kind of stay in that operational silo. They may hire somebody to do the estimating. They may stay in operational longer. And then the third piece you're going to have is somebody to keep score. So you get work, you do work, and you keep score. And the keep score is the finance, the accounting, side of the business. But I would tell you, even at 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, that's a lot of dollars flowing through your company. And if you don't have somebody with a little bit of business acumen, you can be really good at getting work and executing work, but if you can't keep score, to me, those are the three pillars. And so somewhere in your 7 steps, I think you have to start identifying leaders other than yourself as the founder to begin to kind of manage and take over those 3 pieces of the business.
Super rich. That's it's so funny because when Kyle and I manifest all we're doing, I've got the find the work piece. Kyle's got the build the work piece. And then it's actually the guy that's running my company or somebody else that we'll bring in here for the keeping score. And I just would like to testify before everybody in this audience, I have mucked that piece up so bad, so bad. I went through accountants and bookkeepers and Jesus, Lord Almighty, I could say a lot of profane things. So if your books suck, don't worry, but fix them. Hurry up and fix them.
Yeah. And I'll kind of echo that point, but I've got a pretty strong business background in terms of, formal education, MBA, know a little bit about finance and accounting, but I will tell you, construction accounting and percent complete accounting is tricky. And Kyle, I know when you read that book, you probably gained some insights around that, but construction accounting and just the whole idea of how you recognize earned revenue based on percent complete and what that really means, how that impacts your balance sheet, how it impacts your income statement, overbillings, underbillings. If you don't have somebody that understands that, again, you can do a great job of getting profitable work and executing it, but if they don't understand that third piece, you can have real problems. So.
Yeah, and at the risk of talking too much, but for those listening, we went from, without improving our margins, my CFO, now president, transformed our cash position to the tune of I think, and we were a $30 million company, but $3 to $4 million in working capital pivoted because we started billing early, and instead of being in underbillings positions, we're in an overbilling position, and it's all the difference because. And this is one of the things I want to talk to you about, Scott. I think our supply chain's jacked up. We spend 90 days after we've outlaid the labor and to get paid. It's criminal, but it's hard. Collecting money is so. But literally a cash difference of $4 million with no margin improvement. We haven't improved our margins whatsoever, and he managed to transform our cash position. So it's strictly from the accounting seat, right? Nothing about the project. I mean, it is project management related, but asking for the money sooner and going and getting the money sooner. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, Kevin. I mentioned earlier that most of our clients are good companies trying to become great. Years ago, we actually stood up a turnaround business, and we were going to go out and work with jacked up contractors, and primarily our work was coming from banks and bonding companies. And they'd call us and say, hey, we've got this company, they're kind of in trouble. What we discovered is by the time the bank and the bonding company would call you, they were dead on arrival, and it was impossible to fix. And what we did, the one thing I remember from that business is the best leading indicator of success or financial failure is cash flow. If you watch cash flow, it is the best leading indicator of where your business is going. And a lot of business owners have a hard time wrapping their head around the concept that you can be profitable but not have cash and get in a lot of trouble. And so your point is very well taken. And if you don't have somebody that understands that piece, right, you can be profitable but not have cash.
It's crazy. It's super difficult. I think we could do a whole show just on that. So you're a wealth of knowledge, Scott. I'm going to keep plugging it. I'm going to make you come back somehow. There's so much more we have.
I enjoy doing this.
Okay, cool. Well, I know you're busy, and I do want to talk. That is the one question I do want to get to is what's. I think you mentioned you might be sunsetting, so I want to hear where you're headed. But these are my standard questions that I try to close out every one of them, or every one of these with. So. From the desk of Scott Kimpland, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Define good leadership. What's your leadership definition?
I think good leadership to me is, the true mark of a good leader to me is it's not about motivating, inspiring, that sort of thing, getting people to follow, but the real litmus test of a leader to me is someone that creates other leaders, right? I didn't give you your definition of a leader, but someone else that can develop talent. To me, the pinnacle of leadership is being able to replace yourself eventually and create other people who can do what you once did. And, we see that in our own company. We see it in our clients' companies. You've got people out there that are just talented managers and can build anything, but they can't replace themselves and build other people in the company that can do those things. So to me, as it relates to our industry, a leader is somebody that can, basically create from raw material others who can do what they've done.
You were the fastest to answer that. Most people a lot of leaders can't answer that. They can't define what it is they do. I've had people that say, I got to get back to you. They still haven't gotten back to me. What do you think, the Marine Corps has JJ did tie a buckle. There's all these traits, but what are kind of your top 3 to 5 leadership traits when you're evaluating a leader? How do you rack and stack them? What are you looking for in a leader?
Yeah, I mean, to me, leadership's defined by, I think, the people that work for you. Do people follow you? You can be in a position of power or leadership, but are people going to follow you to a place that they normally wouldn't go on their own? Right? To me, that's a characteristic of a good leader. Of, hey, will people follow you to a place that they normally wouldn't go on their own? Right? They'll trust you. Hey, we don't see how this is going to work yet, but they'll line up behind you and kind of say, hey, we trust you. We're going to get there. So I guess that'd be, trust. Trust is got to be big on the list. Transparency. I think about the best leaders I've worked around in the business. They're transparent with everything in terms of, financial performance of the business. Transparent with kind of feedback on your performance. Good or bad, constructive. They'll give you feedback, and you feel like it's honest and sincere. And then I think leaders, to be a decent leader, you've got to have some passion around maybe what you called your North Star or kind of your purpose, items 1 and 2 on your list. You got to have real passion around that stuff.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay. So your favorite, you're in and out of the trades, 38 short years. What's your absolute favorite part about our construction industry?
I guess I didn't tell you at the beginning, even though I kind of grew up in a family, my dad was involved in the business. I love being around it. But you wouldn't want me to build a doghouse for you. And so the thing that I think is always really attracted me to this industry is, the things that we build in this business are amazing. Some of the smartest people I've ever met in terms of things they're able to build with, crappy set of plans, a tight schedule, deadlines, a budget. But to me, this industry is just a make it happen business. And, if you think about it, construction's probably one of the last businesses in the US where we actually produce something of lasting value. You drive by 30 years later and see something that you built and you point to, tell your kids about it. But it's one of the few industries that creates something of lasting, tangible value in our country.
That's so awesome. And then if you were kind of the god of the industry, limitless resources, anything's possible, and could change one thing, like what would you like to see us evolve? What would you fix in the construction space?
Yeah, I think if you kind of blew the model of our industry up, you would never rebuild it with having one group of people designing a project, another.
Yes, I'm sorry. This is the one thing I wanted to talk. This is what I wanted to talk to you. It's like, thank God. Keep going. Thank you.
You think about if you were trying to build a product or something, you wouldn't have one group of people design it, another group of people say, hey, we're going to manage that, and then a third group of trade contractors and maybe even sub trades and sub suppliers. Just the model of our industry is broken. And
I got goosebumps. Yes.
Yeah.
You have to come back because we have to talk. It's so solvable. Preach.
Yeah. I'll be interested to hear your solution for that. I guess I'm a little biased. I'm a trade contractor guy. I'm a specialty guy. And anymore, they're the only ones that build things. General contractors don't build anything anymore. And, everything's subcontracted out. Anyway, I don't want to hack any of the GCs off, but the whole model is broken.
No, I'm a GC and I agree. I'm a GC and I agree because we have lost sight of production. That's all that matters is production. And the GC is sitting there saying, oh, I don't care. I make 3.5% on this waste, right? It's broken, right? And when it's hard to get a GC into that mindset. And I try and do that every day. But anyways, I was getting me fired up, Scott.
For those that weren't listening, just watching Kevin and Kyle's head nodding was it was cinematic. It was cinematic.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, if you look at general contractors, the way they make money is not aligned with the way trade contractors make money, right? Trade contractors make money by meeting and beating the labor budget. As labor goes, their business goes. GCs, as long as they hit the schedule, they have their scope covered. There's no gray areas or gaps in the scope. And they manage the contract, they make about the margin that they thought they were going to make on it, right? And so I think it's just misalignment of goals. And, I've seen it when I first got into business in 87, most general contractors back then actually self-perform work. They would do concrete, steel, things that were on the critical path. And so they understood production, they understood labor, they understood productivity. But I think GCs, CMs, and trade contractors live in two different worlds, and they're not. Their goals aren't aligned. I also think there's too many different stakeholders. There's a limited amount of margin in a construction project to go around. And I think there's too many stakeholders in a project feeding off of that limited margin.
We've got some iterating to do. you're gonna be my advisor, because I have a plan. I absolutely, I wholly believe it. And let me make sure that I quote this right, because we had an architect on that said every industry but construction has become more efficient. Is that true to you? Have you seen that stat? Like the efficient.
Yeah, there's some data out there that the way the government measures productivity is kind of a little questionable, but their data would show you that our industry is no more productive today than it was 20 years ago, where other industries have been able to utilize technology or different ways to improve it. But
yeah, we'll dive into that. Okay, and this one's a little bit hard, but Scott, what makes you unique?
What makes me unique? I don't know that I'm unique. I think I think one of the things it does is just my experience, right? I always tell people, I'm clearly not the smartest guy on this podcast, but I've gotten.
Today you are.
You might be.
I've had an opportunity to work with literally thousands of companies, over my 38 years. And after a while, you begin to kind of see, like any population of anything, you've got A players, B players, C players, or you got above average, you got average, and you got underperformers. But over time, you begin to say, hey, what are those, what are the 300 plus hitters in the construction industry? What are they doing different than the 250 batters, right? And, when you see that enough, I think it gives you just kind of unique perspective and confidence around, hey, here's the levers that you really have to pull in one of these labor-intensive businesses to really kind of change the performance. So if anything's unique, it's probably just my experience of having been in a lot of really well-run companies to be able to compare and contrast them to average performers, underperformers.
Anytime I see a guy that's incredibly proficient and overwhelmingly humble, I know he's special, even if he doesn't know it. So I'm going to answer it for you. I really appreciate your humility and your wisdom, because there's a lot of it. So thank you for coming and sharing it with us. Okay, so you can answer all of these or one of these. So I'll run through the list twice. These are my fun ones. So your favorite famous person, your least favorite famous person, the story of the toughest season of life or period of life that you went through. Similar to the construction industry, if you were God for a day, had all the or not God for a day, but you had all the resources in the world and could manifest any change, and you could solve any problem, and you're not resource constrained, what change would you make? What would you like to see in the world that's not existing? And what do you want or what would you want your construction legacy to be? I ripped that one off of Kyle because he asked me.
Yeah, let's take the superpower in the world, not related to construction. It doesn't have to be related to construction.
No, sir.
Yeah, I guess, when you kind of reach point in life where I'm at in terms of age, you start to see friends and loved ones, face health challenges and things like that. But I think, probably a cure for cancer or, some sort of significant medical breakthrough relative to people suffering with cancer or those kind of things would be probably the thing I'd want to solve for.
Beautiful.
We all deal with people that go through that stuff.
Yeah. Amen. Okay. Last question. And I just want to get if the top books for entrepreneurs, leaders, aspiring construction or otherwise professionals, what's your must read book?
Yeah, I do a lot. I do probably do more podcasts than reading because I'm on airplanes and that kind of stuff. But I'm a huge fan of James Clear, Atomic Habits, if you haven't read that, but his stuff is just so practical, and it's all about developing small, consistent behaviors. And if you follow small, consistent behaviors and processes over time, they kind of reach the way he describes it. You kind of get an exponential impact at some point. When you improve 1%, every day, you kind of reach a point where that goes exponential and kind of a hockey stick. But I'm a big fan of James Clear. I'm a big fan. This is certainly not new, but the servant leadership stuff is always been kind of interesting to me. And again, I think as a leader, it's less about, my performance, but more about, the people that I'm working on developing. I get more juiced seeing my younger people, younger employees that, I'm developing have success and make, milestone breakthroughs, that sort of thing. So those are two big things there that I would suggest. Yeah.
That's great. My last thing I'd say is our intent is to frankly make the trades cool again, to give the trades a voice. I think the built with guys are doing it really good for civil. I think Kyle and I both have an ambition to kind of mobilize the community. There's 8 million of us in the trades profession, and we want to like give a voice and like be a resource for them. That being said, any topic recommendations or guest recommendations that we should pursue? Is there anybody that we should be talking to that we may or may not have seen by your accord?
Do you guys know Herb Sargent? You don't? Oh, you got to follow Herb Sargent. Now, he's kind of tied in with the Beltwick guys. Herb is, in my opinion, he's probably one of 3 companies that Sargent is the name of the company. They're little history. Herb, I don't remember the history, but I think started by his dad or something. But basically, Herb bought the business. He sold the business, bought the business back, grew it. Probably 8-10 years ago, he sold to an ESOP. He is still involved, and it's a pretty big civil business in Maine and kind of down Mid-Atlantic. I think they have an office, Virginia, Mid-Atlantic. But Herb is probably one of 3 contractors that I really see doing something different relative to attracting talent and building talent. It's unique. It's out of the box in terms of what other people are doing. He's very active on LinkedIn. He lives down in Florida, I think, now that he's semi-retired. But he, in the industry, he's probably one of my mentors and guys that I look up to. He has done it. I mean, he's not talking about it from a consulting perspective or, this guy has lived every angle of the business, and he's created a business where he's basically bringing young 18, 19 years olds into his business. He's focusing less on teaching them the trade skills and more about life skills, how to buy a car, how to get a loan, how to go to the grocery store and buy, healthy meals for a week on $100, of groceries. But he's doing some really cool stuff. And early indications are his retention on these young people. He focuses real hard the first 12, 18 months on just helping them learn things that, in my generation, my dad would have taught me, or somebody, would have taught me. But there are things kids aren't learning today. And it's, everything of, how to meet somebody, how to shake hands, how to give them eye contact. But it's stuff that kids aren't getting at home today. And he's just taken an interest in helping them grow as an individual. And he's finding that, within 12 to 18 months, he can probably hook their heart and have a career opportunity for them.
That's beyond construction right there. That's like doing the Lord's work. And we've been trying to do something similar, but I can't attest to any accolades. That's fantastic.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Reach out to Herb. He'll talk to anybody. He is an awesome guy. He's a quality individual, but there's a lot of things to his story that just, they'll get you juiced up.
Yeah.
Let's get him, Kev.
Yeah, I got a new hero.
We got to get him here.
One of 3 companies you might share in the other 3. So Sargent is doing it different. What are the other 3 that are like?
I don't want to throw any names out there of clients. One of them is actually, it's pretty interesting. It's a family-owned business, 2 sons, a dad. They're in the electrical trade, but they're doing the same thing. They are getting kids in their local high school. They're in somewhat of a rural area in the Southeast. But they are bringing these kids in and just kind of getting them hooked on their business. And they're having pretty good success hiring these kids that don't aspire to go to college, coming out of high school. And the electrical trade, if you want to make some coin, it's a skilled trade. You can make a darn good living. But they're one of the other ones that just come to mind real quickly. They're investing a lot of time and money in it.
That's rad. No, it's cool for us to benchmark. That's fantastic. Any closing marks from you, Kyle or Scott, before we wrap this up? I would just like to say I sincerely appreciate you making time. I know you're busy, and that you would invest the time in us and our audience and what we're doing. It means a lot, and I will not hound you like a salesman, but I have for the next time. The things that we didn't get to is you hit on it just in this last bit is like, how do we, those of us that can't find labor, how do we find labor? What have you seen as some good SOPs surrounding that? we didn't talk about this, but I find that we have a very big disparity. Like there's no true salesman. All project managers have to be everything. So there's no specialists. I'm very interested to see what you see in some of the best sales versus project management. We talked about next level business 101. I'd love to dive into some more of that in detail. I really want to know where you're headed next. So maybe you can close us with what does the Sunset Tour look like? And then I really a full episode. Let's sit down and talk about like how do we align the incentives of our total supply chain? I think from tip to tail, it's jacked up to say the least. It's a bunch of entities working against each other, pretending that we have a common goal and we don't. I think it can be fixed. And then I think it'd be a very interesting from your perspective versus mine, the scorecard element, the accounting. Do you need a bookkeeper? Do you need a controller? When do you need a CFO? What do you do fractionally? All of that would be great. And then with an emphasis on WIP, as you said, the cash flow is the best leading indicator. So that would be what I'd love to talk to you more in depth about if and when you have time. But with that, I'd say, Kyle, any closing remarks? My closing remarks are, Scott, I'm thrilled you came. Thank you. Would love to know what you're up to, what the next chapter brings for you. And then I'll turn it to Kyle, and then we'll let you have the last word, Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Kevin has got a lot of gratitude for you being here. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I learned a lot. And I appreciate you. Thank you for all you're doing for this industry. You're certainly making a big impact. I can see that out on the internet and through FMI's reputation. So thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it.
That's very kind, Kyle. Thank you. Yeah. In terms of, I don't have any specific plans yet, but as a shareholder in FMI, there's kind of a time frame or age that they buy back your stock. I'm kind of in that step right now. One of the things I am doing, I'm on a couple boards of ESOP companies. In most cases, a company that becomes employee stock owned. If it's 100% ESOP, they require outside board members. So I'm on several of those and just got invited to a third one. And then I've got some other clients that are still privately owned, but they believe in kind of having outside thinking at their board level. So I'm an advisory board member. So I'm on their board of directors, but I don't have a vote, right? I'm purely advisory. And I think my next chapter will be doing that kind of work. I still love the industry. I love giving back. I've worked pretty hard for 38 years, spent a lot of time on airplanes. I just, I'm probably not, I'm not at some point not going to want to kind of run at the pace that FMI expects me to run at as a partner in the business. So I'll continue to do some things and maybe pick and choose a few clients that I work with, but kind of do it more on my pace and my time.
That's awesome. I want everybody to know that the Travis Matthews shirt that Kyle's wearing, when I have my way, that will be a tradesman shirt. We're launching a lifestyle construction brand for the trades. We're just not ready yet. It's going to be a TM for tradesmen.
There you go.
I rock Travis Matthews. I get really frustrated because I hate golf, and I'm like, I love the clothes. So I'm like, give me a clothing brand that's not about golf. I want to make one for the trades. I want to reiterate my gratitude for Scott and Kyle arranging that, being there. Key takeaways is like, don't chase the shiny object. Be a project manager, not a project witness. I hope you guys got some value. Want to thank the Pineapple production team for putting this together. Want to thank the listener. And again, I want to thank Scott for giving us his time. If you liked it, comment, like, subscribe, do that whole jazz. If you didn't like it, fill out the survey. We want to know how we're doing. Thanks for coming and tuning in.